Actual Seder, as opposed to philosophy. So first of all, I don't know if anything I'm going to tell you is novel to you, and I don't know if anything I'm going to tell you you haven't heard already. I asked the people who asked me to do this, I said, what about overlap? I says, we'll risk it, we'll wing it, we're not going to worry about overlap. So we're going to do the Seder. We're going to talk about the Seder as if it's an actual Seder rather than just the learning about the Seder. If you open up the Haggadah, which you probably do not have, the first thing in the Haggadah is Biur Chametz. The unusual thing here is you don't say al bedikas chametz, even though you make the bracha when you're doing bedikas chametz, right? You should say al bedikas chametz. And the reason you don't make the bracha al bedikas chametz is for two reasons. Number one, bedikas chametz is not enough. Number two, you don't really need bedikas chametz. You need biur chametz. Biur chametz means you're not allowed to own chametz on Pesach. How do you not own chametz on Pesach? You finish it, you destroy it, and you're mafkid it, right? You eat it up. You destroy whatever you have, right? The mefader v'zeder the ruach. You crumple it and put it into the wing, or you throw it into the sea. Our custom is, of course, is to burn it. And you say kol chamira. If I have chametz, it's hefker. It's not mine. I don't want it. Anybody can have it. It has no value to me. That's called biur. Biur means in Yiddish oisramen. Biur doesn't mean to destroy only. It means to get it out of my property. So this is one of those cases where you make the bracha in the beginning of the mitzvah for something that you're going to do later. I'll give you the opposite scenario. There is an argument to be made that when you build a sukkah, you should make a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekishanu mitzvahs yizvanu livnei sukkah. I think the Yerushalmi talks about that question. The Rambam brings the issue himself. Or when you prepare Daled Minim, you say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekishanu mitzvahs yizvanu to prepare Daled Minim. So the halacha says that if you're doing a mitzvah in stages, you wait for the final stage, which is the actual mitzvah, and wait to make the bracha then. That's why we do not make a bracha livnei sukkah or lasei sukkah. You make a bracha leishei basukkah. And when you make the bracha leishei basukkah, you're including in that also the fact that you did a mitzvah when you built it. And the same is true when you purchase Daled Minim. Here is the opposite. You're making the bracha al biur chametz when you're doing bedikas chametz. The biur chametz is going to be the next day when you burn it, and when you say the second kol chamira, where you're mafkir not just the chametz you don't know about, you're mafkir even the chametz that you do know about. So there's just a little bit of an interesting thing to notice, right? You're making a bracha on something which you're going to do the next day. Now, of course, it's one person per household that makes this bracha, and it's one of those weird cases. The women who did all the cleaning are not allowed to do the bedika, because since they cleaned the house, they're not going to do it so well because they already think the house is clean. So the men have to do the bedika because they didn't clean the house, so they'll take the bedika seriously. And then, of course, we say kol chamira. It's very important to say kol chamira. It's very important for you to say kol chamira, to be mafke your chametz, because on Pesach we're particular about chametz till a mashahu. Pesach we're very, very, very frum. And it's impossible for a person to be sure they don't have a mashur chametz in their home by saying kol chamira, by saying the words, and you have to say them on time. Meaning the morning of Erev Pesach, which this year is on a Wednesday, before the time allotted, you have to say kol chamira, whether you are by a burning or you're not by a burning, because if you have chametz, you want to get rid of it. You don't want it to be yours. If then, during Pesach, you find a wafer, which happens in Jewish homes, the wafer is not, you're not over by your matzah because you were mafked that wafer. It's not, you made it hefker, it's not yours. But you made it hefker by saying kol chamira.
So why do you have to burn it?
So the truth of the matter is, it's a minig. The burning the chametz is a symbolic thing, and really more than anything else, it's a mystical thing. It's a Kabbalistic thing. You don't have to have 10 pieces of bread either.
You're not Pesach if you find chametz.
So you're supposed to burn it, api halacha. You're not burning it because it's yours, you're burning it so you shouldn't eat it. In the expression of the Gemara, Shema Yimtza Gluska Yafa, you find a beautiful cookie and you're going to want to eat it. So you're burning it even if it's not yours and you're not able to buy it or by your matzah, you're burning it because you don't want to have it. And after Pesach, you're not going to have enough from it.
Why can't you eat it after Pesach?
Okay, technically you probably are allowed if it's not yours, but we don't do it because you invite Rabbi Yossi. I mean, we're machmir on every side. That's the answer to your question. On the one hand, the hefker was the hefker, and the mechira was the mechira. On the other hand, if the wafer is in the part of the house that you sold, it's not a problem. If you find the wafer in your Pesach kitchen, in other words, you didn't do a proper bedika. The cookie was not in the closet that was sold. The cookie was. A guy told me, it did such a painful story. He was newly married his first year, and they were so afraid of Pesach, him and his wife, and they worked so hard to make Pesach. They sat down to the Seder, and on the shelf in their dining room, they had the dish with the salt that they used to do hamaitzi. It was full of crumbs. They started to cry. Were the Eibay Rabbi Yossi? Of course not. They were mafkir it, and they didn't want it. But you try so hard, it's right there in front of your nose, in the dining room, in the room where you're sitting with the Seder. You ordered to that salt, they killed in 15 million deaths. You could save it after Pesach. You're supposed to put it away. And if you find it out, the halacha is you destroy it, because we burn the candle on both ends. The hefka makes it not yours, if you find it, you don't want to eat it after Pesach. You destroy it. Now, as you already sort of led me on, the real business of burning chametz is an inyan pnimi. In other words, from a technical perspective of halacha, you're by the chametz, right? But you don't have to put down 10 pieces. We put down 10 pieces. That's not because otherwise the bracha is the bracha levatala. Because you're not making the bracha on the bread that you're finding. You're not making the bracha on the bread that you're burning. You're making the bracha on the kol chamira. Now, it is a little bit unusual, because we don't usually make a bracha on a mitzvah of dibur. You understand? If you don't burn the chametz, you're making a bracha on words. And to make a bracha on words, actually we do that by the Megillah. I'm sorry? Point well taken. Right. You don't make a bracha on a bracha. But you don't really need the 10 pieces. You don't have to make a fire. Api Kabbalah, these things are important. There's mystical reasons to burn it. The Yehiratzen that we say after we burn the chametz by day is very interesting. You talk about destroying ruchnias dika chametz, right? What's chametz? Chametz is gaive. Chametz is gaive. Chametz is midas rois. Chametz is on a more fine level, but not entirely ideal level, needing to understand everything and lacking the ability to accept and to have bittul and kabbalah sel and amuna, which is what matzah is. And before Pesach, we destroy the chametz. We destroy our gaiva, our yeshus, our association with all those other midas rois. And if you read the Hiratzen, you see that a lot of the inyana that we do as a minhag is justified not only on the halachic grounds, or let me say it a little bit differently, not entirely on the halachic grounds, it's justified on the spiritual grounds. We're destroying our ruchnias dika chametz. And I want to say something to you about this, okay? Chametz is good. Reasons for things are good. You're supposed to have reasons for things. And gaiva is also good. But not Pesach. Because every Pesach we reset. Every Pesach we're reborn as a nation. And when you're born, you're little. And when you're little, the most important thing is your emunah. When you're little, the most important thing is your sincerity, your tmimus. What you're little, what's most important is your ability to have kabbalah sel, to do what you're told. So Pesach, get rid of chametz. Chametz, the gaiva, which is a midah ra, and the tam, which means the need to understand, they may have a place in our lives, but not now. When a Yid goes out of Mitzrayim, when a Yid is born anew, the foundation of being a Jew is emunah, faith, sincerity, and acceptance, kabbalah sel. Every Pesach we reset. Every Pesach we envisage, we imagine ourselves going out of Mitzrayim. We're starting again. And when we start again, we're little children, and we're little children, we eat matzah, we destroy chametz, because the beginning of our lives is emunah and tmimus. If I had to say that in a more comprehensive way, this would be the phrase that I would use. Avraham Avinu came to God brain first. We come to God, brain last. Avraham Avinu went from his brain to his neshama, to the munah. We go from our neshama to our brain. Pesach is the neshama season. It's the beginning. Every year we're starting over. So we destroy the chametz, which later on is going to become not just acceptable, but actually is going to become a mitzvah. Pesach, we destroy the chametz, we destroy the gaiva, we destroy the need to reason, and we approach our connection to Hashem with faith and sincerity and Kabbalah. Shavuos, the korban in the Beis HaMikdash, was dafke chametz. It's the chitas of 2 days ago, b'ashkacha pratis. 2 days ago. Yeah, the korban of Shtei Lechem, which is brought on Shavuos, right? And the next pasuk says, "V'chisakriv mincha." You're not allowed to bring in the Beis HaMikdash any chametz. You're not allowed to bring in the Beis HaMikdash anything which is tasty. And then you immediately say, "Oh, there's 2 exceptions." One exception is the chametz bread of Shtei Lechem brought on Shavuos, and the other is, I think, bikurim, right? The fruits that you bring to the Beis HaMikdash. So Shavuos, we're going to dafke use chametz, because the avoida is we should graduate the chametz, we should graduate the gaiv, we should graduate the tam badas, but not Pesach. This morning I was giving a class to my students in yeshiva, and it was talking about mizmor l'soida, which is the only korban that we mentioned after Baruch Shama. All the korbanos are before, mizmor l'soida is after. So it says in Medrash that after Mashiach comes, all the korbanos are bottled except for the korban toida. So the question becomes, what makes the korban toida so unique that all the korbanos are bottled? Kadesh is bottled, Osham is bottled, Eil is bottled, Shlomim is bottled, only korban toida. Why? So one of the reasons it's given is because korban toida is the only korban yachid that has chametz. And la'asid lavei, the korban is going to be elevating chametz. So it's not always bad, it's not entirely bad. Now it's bad, now it's bad, and now it's klipa. So we destroy the chametz. And that's where Pnimius Dika people obviously have to be very frum about Pesach, but Pnimius Dika people not just from getting rid of the physical chametz, they're from getting rid of the midas reis, the gaiva, and all those other factors, and that's really the kavana in quotations of destroying the chametz out of Pesach. We daven mincha and then we say Korban Pesach. It's written in the Seder. I don't know what the girls do. Do the girls say, in my house we used to sit down together and say Korban Pesach as a family, but you daven mincha first, because the Korban mincha, tfilas mincha, goes on Talmud Shemein Arbayim. Every day of the year except for one, the Aleha Hashlem Kol HaKabanas Kulam. He said it this morning, right? The second Korban, the Korban Talmud Shemein Arbayim, closes the day. Aleha Hashlem, after you bring Talmud Shemein Arbayim, there's no more Kabanas. There's one exception a year, one. And that's the Korban Pesach. The Korban Talmud was brought early, depending on whether it was a weekday or Shabbos or Erev Shabbos. It was brought earlier than normal. Instead of being brought at what we would call 9.5 hours, which means, assuming that sunrise is at 6 and sun sets at 6, that would be 3:30, Mincha Ketana. They brought it 2:30 or even 1:30 or even 12:30, which would be Mincha Gedolah. So they had time to bring the Korban Pesach. So the Talmud was before the Korban Pesach. So our custom is we daven Mincha and then we say Korban Pesach. Now, a lot of times people daven late. The Korban Pesach is a korban. Korbanos have to be brought by day. So we're always particular, but Erev Pesach especially, you want to daven Mincha on time, so you say the Korban Pesach before the Shki. You're supposed to read the words, and by reading the words, it's as if you brought the korban. It starts with the words on the Shalom Farim Saseinu, that we can't bring Korbanos nowadays, so we are yotze bringing the Korbanos by saying it. And I know that Erev Pesach is a day that everybody is busy, especially girls. But you should, if you're going to daven mincha, you should find a few minutes to say the nusach of Korban Pesach as well. Now, comments or questions? The Haggadah, right? We actually say Kadesh Urchatz, right? We say it Kadesh Urchatz, or you sing it. At the beginning of the Seder, you actually say the whole Seder of the Haggadah, and this is very, very unusual because it's the only time of the year that we do it. Jews always have a Seder, you always have a Seder, right? You eat Kiddush, you wash, you eat fish, you eat soup, you eat chicken, you eat dessert, you bench, right? That's a Seder. But nobody says Kadesh, Urchatz, Lechem, gefilte fish. You don't spell out the steps, you don't talk through the Seder, you just do it. And that's true in all areas of life. When you go into a ritual, you don't start the ritual by saying what you're going to do. Seder shall Pesach, you start the Seder by orally saying, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be 15 steps. Kadesh is 1, Urchatz is 2. And you actually verbally say the whole nusach, Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, Rochsa, Meitzimatza, Morah, Kerech. Why? There's 2 reasons. The obvious reason is because the Pesach Seder is more complicated than other Starim. It's complicated enough to warrant that we should articulate, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'll tell you a cute little detail, but there's no such thing as cute little details. I grew up in 770. And there were people who made announcements, okay? The Gaboya made announcements, sometimes the secretaries made announcements, but there were certain announcements made by the Fabrengen. Now, before my time, I don't remember this, the person who made those announcements was a chassid by the name of Reb Zalman Duchman. He was a very interesting chassid, a very chassidish yid. He would get up and make announcements. When he passed away, his announcements were made by Rabbi Talashevsky, whom I remember. But Rabbi Talashevsky would use the same nusach that Reb Zalman Duchman had used before him. Where Reb Zalman Duchman took this nusach from, I don't know. But he would stand up and he would say, the Seder vet itzter zayin azoy. That's how he would start his speech. The Seder will now be as follows. Frier vet the Rebbe soll gesund sein bench. First the Rebbe is going to bench. Danach vet the Rebbe soll gesund sein daven and meidev. Then the Rebbe can daven meidev. Danach vet the Rebbe soll gesund sein machen avdol. Then we have avdol. Danach vet the Rebbe soll gesund sein teilen keis shel bracha. Then the Rebbe is going to give keis shel bracha. Umebeta soll sein mit der Seder. You should listen to the Vada Mesader. This was a regular announcement that was made 4 times a year. Matzah Rosh Hashanah, Matzah Sukkot, Matzah Pesach, Matzah Shavuos. The Seder with Itzter Zayin Azoy. This was normal. So the story goes that 1 year after he made his announcement, the Rebbe said, the Seder with Itzter Zayin Azoy. First, David is going to give Yidden a good year. He's going to bench them, a table, all the wonderful things. And then, Mashiach is going to come. All forget them Seder. He repeated the same words Zalman Duchman said. You're supposed to listen to what you're told. So the Rebbe repeated, it's the Seder Zayin Azay, and he finished by saying, and you're supposed to listen. But he was talking to the Eibishter, this is the Seder. You're supposed to listen. Give you the table, and then the rest of the other things. And then you have to bring Mashiach to Jenu, and you have to listen. That's the Seder. So on a simple level, we say the 15 Lashonos of Kadesh, because the Seder of Pesach is much more involved, and of course the pneumistic reason is because Pesach, the Seder, is more important than at any other time. I mean, you guys know that the meaning of the word Siddur is Seder, right? You know that. If you look at Siddurim from the Rishonim, they don't use the word Siddur, they call it Seder. How Seder became Siddur, Siddur means an organization, but Seder means an order. We have Siddurim from the Rishonim, like Rashi and others. It's not a nusach, it's rules. You do this first, you do this second. It's a Seder, how you're supposed to do things. There's a very famous Sefer called Seder Hayoim. Seder Hayoim is a Kabbalah Sefer that talks about the order of things, the sequence in which people do things. But Pesach we actually articulated because on Pesach the Seder is more important than at any other time during the year. And the reason is because it's balancing out Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim is the opposite of Seder. Yetzias Mitzrayim is Ein Seif. Yetzias Mitzrayim is, for lack of words, Yechidah Shabanefesh. Yetzias Mitzrayim is Hashem jolting us with a godly light and power which schleps us out of Golus. Yetzias Mitzrayim Hashem does, right? Nigla Aleyeh Melech Malchi Amlocha HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chveidu V'Yasmi G'olam. The Pesach event Hashem does. He took us out of Mitzrayim. Lakachas loy goy mikerev goy. He extracted one nation from within another nation. So when you have an experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim, your role is to give it Seder. Meaning, if you have an extreme experience and you experience it in an extreme way, it remains for an extremely short amount of time. If you have an extreme experience and you structure it and you affect it, that it should come into your life with a Seder, you're giving it the possibility of taking root. That even though Hashem is doing the redeeming, we're actually being redeemed. So Pesach, Seder is extremely important. It's grounding the Geula, the Yilah of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So that's a pneumistic reason why by the Seder is so important. Because the energies are so transcendent, so we counterbalance or we anchor or we ground this experience with a Seder. Go ahead.
How can we experience Yetzias Mitzrayim when we have a Seder and everything is actually
It's all ready, all prepared. Well, I would say that this year it's a little bit easier than normal. Just think about the miracles that are happening in front of our eyes right now.
It's not especially on Pesach.
It's leading up to Pesach. It's between Purim and Pesach. The Makkos happened 12 months before the Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're watching Mashiach come with our eyes. Kipshutei mamish. Now Mashiach is a bas of Adam, you have to understand. Mashiach is not killing Goyim. Mashiach is redeeming Yidden and redeeming the world. Lahav, love, havdalas. You understand? But this year, and everybody has their own Yetzias Mitzrayim. I was thinking this morning when I was davening, it was a Yid who lived in Borough Park, but his children lived in Crown Heights. His name was Rabbi Yankov Friedman. He was a Holocaust survivor. And his children and his grandchildren would say that before they made Kiddush, he would stand up and say, I want to tell the story of my Yetzias Mitzrayim. And he lost a family. He lost a wife and children in the Holocaust. He remarried, had children after the war. But he would tell his story. So you're right, Yetzias Mitzrayim has to be personal. And
Before the Seder?
Well, that's what he did. I'm not telling you what to do. It was very dramatic. He was doing it for his children. He was doing it for his grandchildren. And he's a very warm, he was a very special leader. He was a tzaddik, a yid. He was a pure emotion, pure heart, pure love. And he wanted to create, he was doing it, this is how he felt. But the inyan of Yetzias Mitzrayim is a pneumistic thing. I mean, for most of us, we're struggling with Mitzrayim. You know, we have a lot of Mitzrayims. And if we have succeeded in going out of Mitzrayim, or we're fighting to go out of Mitzrayim, Pesach is a time that Eibishter helps us with our process of it. Yeah.
Yetzias Mitzrayim is going out of Seder.
Yetzias Mitzrayim is bringing going out of Seder into Seder.
You first have to experience that going out of Seder.
It's going out of limitation. Going out of limitation and going out of Seder are not necessarily the same thing.
Is that a kind of limitation?
Seder is an order. Seder is only a limitation if we have OCD, if we're stuck. Seder is order. Order really, the truth of the matter is that people who are organized accomplish an infinite amount. Order is the best way to achieve an enormous amount. So no, limitation and Seder don't necessarily have to be the same thing. But of course you don't make a kaida, but your chasanim do a mitzvah Hashem and your fathers do. And to be sure, if you're sitting at a Seder with no men, I mean, I know many women who come to say they make a kaida. They bring their own matzahs anyway. They might as well make a kaida. It's not written any place anywhere that only men are supposed to have a kaida. I just want to say a couple of interesting things about the kaida. Number one, we do not use one of those shelves situations that are just so beautiful, you know. The Rebbe used to fold a paper or a cloth in 3 ways. That's how he did it. Number two, underneath the kaida you put a plate. The Rebbe used a silver plate. Because it says in Minhagim, Minig Beis Harav, that by the Seder, underneath the minim, you have to have a plate of silver. V'rak ha'admor, only the Rebbe does. And the math is that together with the plate, you have 10 sfiras. The plate is Malchus. The 3 matzahs are Chochma, Bina, Vadas. There was a Makubal in Yisrael who criticized the Rebbe for this. The 6 minim on top is Chagas Nehi. Together with the plate, it's 10. When the Rebbe became Rebbe, he went and he purchased a silver tray, a rectangular silver tray. Rabbi Groner describes it. And they went together to the mikveh, they toiveled it. And the Rebbe wrapped it in paper, because the Rebbe was Mr. Underwhelming, Mr. Underpretentious. The first 20 years, the Rebbe made us say that upstairs by the Shviga, but the Fidik Rebbe's Dira. So the Rebbe didn't want people to see the silver plate. So he covered the silver plate with paper, because officially the Rebbe is not a Rebbe, especially when you're sitting by the Fidik Rebbe's Tish. But in fact, he was a Rebbe. So the Rebbe used to use a silver tray and he put it underneath the matzahs. Later on, the Rebbe added a note that this minig, that you only use a kaida if you're a Rebbe, is only at the Rebbe's Seder. But at your own Seder, you should have a kaida, a plate. And again, Kabbalistically, it's because you want to have 10. You have 3 matzahs, 6 minim, and a plate is esesfiris. You put a plate underneath. On top of that, you put either paper or cloth, and that's where you put the matzahs. On top of that, you put the 6 minim. You know, first of all, talk about matzah. It's very important when you eat matzah to look at it first. You understand that the biggest place of chametz in your possible life on Pesach is in the matzah. You're not going to find chametz in your potatoes. You're not going to find chametz in your cooked or not cooked sugar. It's just not going to happen. There's not going to be chametz in your chopped meat. There's going to be chametz in your matzah. If a matzah is not baked well, it could become chametz. The place where this is most acute is if you have a kfula. You know what a kfula means? That it folds. And you could see it. You look at a matzah, you see right away, there's a wrinkle. You're not supposed to eat the part of the matzah that are folded, you have to break off. Now, it doesn't mean you have to break it off so it's not a shleima. Meaning if you need shleimus and one of the shleimus has a fold, use it for lecha mishneh, but break off that piece before you eat it. So before you eat matzah, this applies the whole 8 days of Pesach, you should never eat a matzah before looking at it. And if there's a fold or a wrinkle, you break it off and you put it in the garbage. You don't need it. Now, we're not assuming it's chametz. We're assuming that it may not be baked well enough, which means that if it comes in contact with water, it's likely to become chametz more quickly than... If the matzah is completely baked, it can't become chametz. The only way the matzah can become chametz is if there's flour left over, or if there's dough which hadn't baked adequately. So you're going to check your matzahs. And we're crazy about shruya. We're nuts about gebraks. We're really radical about gebraks. So the leaves for the mortar that you put on the kaira, you dry them out, especially the leaves that you're going to put into the kaira sandwich, you want it to be very, very dry. And by the way, moist and cold are not the same thing. A wet hand and a cold hand are not the same thing, even though when you dry your hands after until you're dying, you feel like your hands are still wet. They're not wet, they're just cold. But you keep drying them until they warm up to room temperature. You don't got to do that, but they have to be dry. We're very, very particular about shruya. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the kaira. I just want to say this. We do not use in charoises ginger and I forgot the other thing because of chashash chametz. We just use apples and pears and nuts. And we do not put the wine in when we make it. The charoises by us is dry. In other words, if you make the charoises in your house, you want it to be dry. Even though peitis do not make chametz. Pear juice and apple juice will not make your matzah chametz stick, but the constitution of the charoises is a powder. It's not very moist. It's dryish. Use a lot of nuts. What you do is, before morer, you take some of the charoises from the kaira, you put it in the dish of kiddush, where there's a little bit of wine, and you mix it together, and then you have charoises with wine. When you do kairach, you don't even do that. Even if you have wine without sugar, again, it's all part of our absolute extreme about shruya. When you do charoises with kairach, you take dry charoises. You take it from the kaira, you put it on the mortar, and you shake it off. But you do not add wine, because we're completely nuts. I mean, really, completely nuts about shruya. We're obsessive about shruya. And of course, the last day of Pesach, we're completely nuts about the other way, about dafke doing shruya, im kol tafshel v'tafshel. Go ahead.
If it's totally dry, like nothing's even, it's fine if like nothing even sticks in at all, you just dip it in, the whole thing's going to come off.
That's what happens. Now, if you look in Gemara, you're eating the chareises to take out a worm, which is poison in the chareis, in the morer. But that's the minig.
It seems like you do it, but you don't actually eat it or get it.
You eat it if you like it after the Seder, and after the second Seder, no one's in love with chareises at that point. For many reasons, including the fact that it's aged, and it doesn't age like wine, you understand? It ages like fresh fruit. Okay, now, as far as Kiddush, now this is a little bit of a controversy. What I tell my daughters to do is make the whole Kiddush. Make the whole Kiddush. Why? Because we make 4 Be'er Priyagofen by the Seder on 4 cups of wine. The first Be'er Priyagofen is Kiddush. So you're used to being Yetziv from your husband, you're used to being Yetziv from your father. So there's different opinions. Okay, this is what I tell my kids to do. Other parents disagree with me. I tell my daughters, by the Seder, you read the whole Kiddush with me. Be'er Priyagofen and Asher Barchabanu, the whole thing. Of course, you have to just remember, you should not make a shechayanu, because you made your shechayanu when you benched licht. So this is what I do in my home. you'll do whatever your father tells you, and then in Mitzvah one day you'll argue with your husband about who's the bigger of you or him, and who's going to paskin, whether you should do it according to your parents' minig or according to his parents' minig, and let the best person win. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I am telling you that for sure you have to make a Ber Pri Hagafen. If you're Yotze with your father's Kiddush, you have to make a Ber Pri Hagafen, because we make 4 Ber Pri Hagafens and 4 Kaplan. There are other people who don't, by the way. Some people hold that 4 Ber Pri Hagafens is Brachas Avatala. There are some people make only 2 Brachas Avatala. They make the first Ber Pri Hagafen and the third one because you benched. But our custom is make 4 Ber Pri Hagafens, even though there's no real hafsik, because they're 4 mitzvahs. And the Ber Pri Hagafen are making is more a Birchas HaMitzvahs than it is the Birchas HaNenen. You're making a Ber Pri Hagafen as a mitzvah more than you're making a Pri Hagafen to have Hanoah. Okay? So that's the story with Kiddush. Now, of course, girls do not do Haseba. If you want to do Haseba, you're welcome to. I think if you're a feminist, leave that for one of the last things you're going to take on, because it's a pain in the neck. Haseba is not Gishmak. It's not. I don't enjoy Haseba at all. Now, I don't even put a pillow. I just lean. It's because the pillow makes it even harder to sit. Unless you have 2 chairs. Only way to do a Seder properly is have 2 chairs. You put the whole pile of pillows next to you in another chair, and you tell that chair, don't move, don't move. You know what happens? You start doing a Seder, and the chair starts flying away. So if the chair is very heavy, which of course it means it's very expensive, which not a lot of people can afford, you have a very heavy chair next to the chair with a lot of pillows, and then you can lean. But you're supposed to lay, you're supposed to lean. So I just lean. If I need to lean on the person next to me, we take turns leaning on each other. But Haseba, the girls don't do Haseba. Api halacha, they could. There's no reason why not. But we don't do it. Okay, comments or questions? Okay, then we wash. Now, the truth of the matter is, you do all the chumras of washing. You check your nails, you use a towel. By God, don't make a bracha. Please don't make a bracha when you wash Urchatz, because it's a really big problem. The story is that one year, somebody by the Rebbe said, and the Rebbe said to him, it's okay, the Rambam paskins, you can make a bracha for tibul b'mashkin to the time, eat karpas. And that's what the person did. He ate karpas and he continued the Suda, and when it came to Rochza, I don't know if he washed again, I doubt he made another bracha. After that Seder by the Fabrengen, the Rebbe changed his mind. That he says, I told this person to make a bracha on karpas. And he made a second until it's time by Rochza for a moitzi. But I changed my mind, because since the Alter Rebbe is so machmer about Safek brachas, it's happened at my house that one of my kids made a shekeshav and he had to eat moitzi matzah. He loved it. The rest of us waited for him, but please don't make a bracha. I just want to say, I remember growing up, we would talk. You didn't make a bracha, so there's no shalf mehefsik. You really shouldn't talk. You washed your hands. I mean, the whole of the Haggadah, it's not on the bracha, it's on the netila. And Beklal, when you wash your hands, you're supposed to be aware of your hands till you bench. Otherwise, you have to wash your hands again. In the middle of a Suda, you're supposed to be aware of your hands. The Til Sedam goes to the food, not just in the first kazayas. Anyway, then we do tibuli b'mashke. You dip your vegetable into salt water. The minig is either potato or onion. The Rebbetzin, I just saw from Mendel Notik, who had a very special relationship with the Rebbetzin, that the Rebbetzin told him that in 1941, they were in Vichy. They were in German-occupied France. And the Rebbe had a very hard time getting together what he needed for the Seder. He needed matzah, he needed wine, he needed karpas, he needed morech, all the things. And the one thing he was missing was an onion. He had potatoes. And the Rebbe got on a trolley to travel across the city to find an onion. And the Rebbe Tzachayim Mushka said to Mendel Notik, so gesund sein, ich hab nicht gewusst, wie ich alle Maseitem mal sein. When my husband got on the trolley to get the onion, I wasn't sure if I'd ever see him again, because they were arresting Jews off the street. The Rebbe was Moshe Nefesh B'Poyel for an onion, not for karpas, for an onion, because Minik Chabad is to do karpas with an onion. But the most important thing is that we eat less than a kazayas, because you make a Ber Pri Adama, you don't want to have to bench, we eat a small piece. The kids want to eat 64 potatoes for karpas because it's so much fun. You dip it in the salt water all of a sudden tastes delicious. Everything on Pesach is better than the rest of the year. After the Pesach, who is the salt water? But okay, anyway, karpas. Now, of course, that you do yachas. Now, you have to think about the halachic side of this, the cultural side of this, okay? The tradition was, there's a machlokes b'Shammai and Beis Hillel, but the halacha is, first you make Kiddush. Then you wash your hands. Then you break bread. Pesach, you make Kiddush, you wash your hands, and you eat tibuli b'mashki, you eat a vegetable. So the kid says, wait a minute, what happened to the bread? But as soon as they finish with the karpas, you take out the bread and you break it. So the kid says, okay, a minor detour. You understand? A minor detour. We usually make Kiddush, wash and eat bread. Today we made Kiddush, wash, we ate vegetables, and now we're going to eat bread. But you break the bread and you don't eat it. You put it away. And you fill up the second cup. The child knows that the second cup of wine is for benching. In a regular Seudah, you have 2 cups of wine. A cup that opens the Seudah Kiddush, and a cup that closes the Seudah Kesha Bracha, benching. So the kid says, wait a minute, you're filling up the second cup of wine for benching. We didn't eat yet manishtana. That's the scheme. That's the choreography. You're doing things like Tmiyat Tinoikis. Number 1, the vegetable. Number 2, you break the bread, don't eat it, you put it away. And you start saying the Haggadah, and you say the Haggadah in a cup. So the child says, manishtana. And there's a few things that are being played out here. One of them is that the Haggadah is said in a broken piece. The Haggadah is said in a broken piece. Ish ani darkei beprusa. A poor person cannot afford the whole loaf, he eats a broken piece. So you break the bread, and it's called lechem oini. Lechem oini means the bread of affliction. That's how Rabbi Shachar translates it. But lechem oini means lechem she'oinin alav devarim harbe. Lechem oini means the bread of which we I'm looking for a word, I can't find it. Which we say rhetorically, I'm missing a word, many words. In other words, you say the Haggadah on the Levi. You say the Haggadah on the broken piece. Which is why the Minhag Chabad is that for most of the Haggadah, the matzah of Levi sticks out of the kaida. Okay, what's going to happen is you're going to do a Heilach Ma'anya, you're going to break the matzah, you're going to put away the afikoymen, and you're going to leave the other piece of Levi sticking out. And you're going to say Heilach Ma'anya. Then you're going to push it away, you're going to cover it. Why? Because any time you take out the wine, you put away the bread because you don't want to embarrass the bread. You fill up the cup, you're going to say Manishtana, you're going to push away the cup, you're going to bring the kaida close, and you're going to uncover the Levi. The Levi is going to stay exposed till you get to V'hisha Amda. V'hisha Amda, you're going to put that piece of matzah back in, you're going to pick up the cup and do V'hisha Amda, put the cup down, push it away, and pull the matzah out. And you're going to say the whole Seder on the exposed Levi, until you're going to get to Lefichach. At the very end of the Seder, you have Lefichach, you push the matzah back in, you pick up the cup, you say Lefichach, and then you say Hallel, and then you say the Bracha Asher Galanu. All of that is done with the wine, so the matzah is covered. But for the duration of the Seder, when we're reading the Haggadah, the piece of matzah which is broken is out because the Seder is said on a perusa, on a broken piece. And it begins with Heilach Ma'anya, and it begins with the child asking Manishtana, and with us answering Avodah Mayinu, because the design of the Pesach Seder is that the children should ask. And we should answer. That's the structure of the Haggadah. So we set the child up to ask questions, and then he asks his question, and then we answer them. Go ahead.
So if there's a real answer to these questions, then what does it mean that it's so that the children should ask? Because you would do it anyways. Or if the answer is so that the children will ask, then how's that an answer?
Let me just tell you a story. It's famous. This is one of those famous videos that goes around every year Pesach time. 50 years ago, the Rebbe went to the Seder of the girls of Mechon Chana, which he did every year. He went out into the basement, he went to the kitchen, he spoke to the cook, he came out and he gave the bracha, the girls the bracha. One year, Rabbi Yossi Paltiel from Minnesota was here to conduct the Seder with the girls at Mechon Chana. So when the Rebbe was leaving, he asked, who's going to ask the 4 questions? So they told the Rebbe, Mendy Feller is my age. Mendy Feller's probably, I'm 55, 56, I'm 60. He's Eidah, many times over. But then he was a boy, he was bar mitzvah. So the Rebbe said, and does his father, turned to Rabbi Feller, does his father know the answer? And everybody laughed. So the feeling was that the Rebbe made a joke. The next day after Musaf, the Rebbe called Rabbi Feller into his room. He sent Rabbi Klein to call him. Rabbi Feller came to the Rebbe's room. So first of all, the Rebbe told him today's his birthday. His birthday is first day Pesach, so there was an opportunity for the Rebbe to give him a bracha on his birthday. And then the Rebbe said to him, Das was ich hab gesagt, Nächten hab ich nicht gemacht, kein joke. What I said last night was not a joke. So Rabbi Feller said to the Rebbe, maybe what the Rebbe means is that since we make the Seder every year, the children already know what's happening. So what's the point of going through the questions and answers again? And the Rebbe said, yes, that's what I meant. This is what you have to explain to the children. And that's the answer to your rhetoric. It is a dance. It is a choreography. The child knows the questions, the child knows the answers better than his parents in many cases. The structure of the Seder revolves around the children. This is how it's done. And when you say, but we know it already, so then what's the point of doing it? That's the question you have to find an answer for. Why do we keep doing something that everybody knows what it's about? And the answer basically is some things you don't do to get information, some things you do to re-experience. Ibeleben, you're living it over again, and you're living it over in the framework of the children asking questions. Now, there are 4 questions, 4 sons. Chacham, Rasha, Tom, She'en Yedei Alishal, each one has a different question. And there are 3 answers. Okay, in the Gemara it's brought 3 opinions. The Mishnah says, Maschil BiGnus b'shvach. What does that mean? I wish I had more time. You start with our own shame and you go towards our own praiseworthiness. You start off saying bad things about the Jewish people and you radiate forward towards saying positive things about the Jewish people. The 3 opinions are, the opinion which is in the very beginning is Avodah Mayinu. We were slaves in Egypt. The second opinion is, you start with Arami Eividavi. You go back to Yankov Avinu. Arami Eividavi means Lavan tried to kill Yankov Avinu, and then he went into Mitzrayim and the whole rest. But there's a third Gnus. And the third Gnus is, Mitchila Oivdi Avodah Zara Hayu Aveseinu. Terach Avi Avram V'Avi Nocher V'Yavdu Asalakim Achedim. There are 3 stages of shame that we expose about our origins at the Seder. The earliest is you go back to before Avraham Avinu. The second is you go back to going into Mitzrayim, to Yankov Avinu. And the third, you go back to being slaves in Mitzrayim, going out of Mitzrayim, Avodah Mayinu. In the Gemara, there are 3 opinions. In the Seder, we follow all 3. We start off with Avodah Mayinu. Okay? Then we do Mitchila Evdei Avodah Zarah. And after we do that, we go back to Arami Eividavi. Now, I'm assuming that the reason we start with Avodah Mayinu, because that's really the most important one. The most important answer to the question to the children was, we were slaves in Egypt. You don't have to go back earlier than that. So that's the first thing. You tell the child, we were once slaves, now we're free. Then you go back to the earliest possible Gnai, which is, we were once Evdei Avodah Zarah. Our ancestors once, and Rambam writes about Avraham Avinu, that when Avraham Avinu was a little boy, he worshipped idols. And then he found Hashem, and he created a way of living which is consistent with the belief in one God, and he taught it to the whole world. We mention that every year at the Seder. The last thing we do is the middle of the 3, Arami Eividavi, because that's the one we study. The whole Haggadah studies the 4 psukim that a person says when they brought Bikurim. Arami, the whole story. We went into Mitzrayim, we were slaves in Mitzrayim, we got out of Mitzrayim, and now we're going into Yisrael and we have a whole celebration. So the sequence is, the first one you do is the one that's halachic, the second one you do is the earliest, and the third one you do is the one you're going to spend the most time on, with the one we're going to study. Okay, Akash Nefelich and Pesach.